When a jihadist slaughters someone in broad daylight, citing the Qur'an and screaming Allahu Akbar, the point he's trying to make is usually pretty clear. And yet, after almost every terrorist attack in the West, the media and politicians and police announce, "We're still searching for a motive." Anyone seen a motive lying around in all these strewn body parts? Earlier this week, after two jihadists butchered a British soldier named Lee Rigby on a London street while screaming Allahu Akbar, one of them wanted to make sure his motive couldn't be missed, not even by the media and politicians and police. So he stopped to clarify things for us.
Yeah. The only reason we have killed this man today is because Muslims are dying daily by British soldiers, and this British soldier is one.
So, British soldiers are killing Muslims in Muslim lands. What does this have to do with killing Lee Rigby?
We are forced by the Qur'an in Surah At-Tawbah, through many ayat throughout the Qur'an, that we must fight them as they fight us. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth.
That was Michael Adebolajo, a convert to Islam and a former associate of Anjum Chowdhury. He's given us two reasons for killing Rigby. One, British soldiers are killing Muslims, and two, the Quran commands Muslims to fight those who fight them. Now, his first claim is obviously correct. British soldiers are fighting at least some people who believe in Islam. But not everyone agrees with his second claim, that the Quran commands Muslims to fight those who fight them. Just ask world-renowned Quran scholar and Islamic theologian, Prime Minister David Cameron.
There is nothing in Islam that justifies this truly dreadful act.
Well, I can think of something in Islam that would justify the attack. It's called the Quran. In the clip we saw, Adebolajo refers specifically to Surah At-Tawbah, that's chapter 9 of the Quran, which is filled with commands to fight unbelievers. Surah 9, verse 29, fight those who do not believe in Allah. Surah 9, verse 73, O Prophet, strive hard against the unbelievers and the hypocrites and be unyielding to them. Surah 9, verse 111, surely Allah has bought of the believers their persons and their property for this, that they shall have the garden. They fight in Allah's way, so they slay and are slain. Believers, i.e. Muslims, fight in Allah's way, so they slay and are slain. What did Adebolajo do? He killed someone and then got shot by police. But I'm sure it had nothing to do with the Quran explicitly commanding him to kill and get killed in the very chapter he cited as his reason for killing and waiting around for police to show up and shoot him. I invite everyone to read chapter 9 of the Quran, the last major chapter that Muhammad delivered to his followers. It's basically one long call to jihad and one long condemnation of Muslims who refuse to fight unbelievers. Surah 9, verses 81 and 94 to 95 even say that Muslims who make excuses for refusing to fight the unbelievers will burn in hell, which is probably why Adebolajo said that the Quran forces him to kill.
We are forced by the Quran in Surah At-Tawbah. Forced by the Quran, forced by the Quran, forced by the Quran.
Prime Minister Cameron doesn't seem to understand any of this, but maybe Boris Johnson, the mayor of London, has a better grasp of jihad.
It is completely wrong to blame this killing on the religion of Islam, but it is also equally wrong to try to draw any link between this murder and British foreign policy or the actions of British forces who are risking their lives abroad for the sake of freedom.
According to Mayor Johnson, Rigby's execution had nothing to do with Islam and nothing to do with the British Army fighting Muslims. Apparently, Mayor Johnson hasn't read Surah 5, verse 33 of the Quran, which says, "The punishment of those who wage war against Allah and His Apostle and strive to make mischief in the land is only this, that they should be murdered." or crucified, or their hands and their feet should be cut off on opposite sides, or they should be imprisoned. This shall be as a disgrace for them in this world, and in the hereafter they shall have a grievous chastisement. What's the penalty for making mischief in a Muslim land? If it's something serious, the penalty is death. Who was Lee Rigby? He was a machine gunner in the British Army. He had a tour in Afghanistan, and more recently he was recruiting more soldiers to go to places like Afghanistan. By the way, bringing a non-Muslim military into a Muslim land to interfere in Muslim affairs is the most extreme form of mischief making, according to Islam. The penalty is death. The Quran even tells Muslims how to kill in order to spread fear. In Surah 8, verse 12, Allah declares, "I will cast terror into the hearts of those who disbelieve. Therefore, strike off their heads and strike off every fingertip of them." Strike off their heads and their fingertips. Don't just kill them, mutilate them. But Rigby's beheading and mutilation had nothing to do with Islam, right, Mayor Johnson? How could this be any simpler? There are only two ingredients in this recipe for terrorism. Take 1 cup of the Quran, add a tablespoon of mischief making, stir together, and wait for the attack. So, Mayor Johnson, saying that the teachings of Islam and British soldiers fighting in Afghanistan have nothing to do with the massacre of Lee Rigby is like saying that flour and sugar had nothing to do with the biscuits you were probably munching on for your afternoon tea while Rigby was being slaughtered like an animal in the city that elected you mayor.
The fault lies wholly and exclusively in the warped and deluded mindset of the people who did it.
Yeah, you and Mr. Cameron are the authorities on deluded mindsets. Do you guys have any strategy at all for dealing with terrorism in the UK?
We will never give in to terror or terrorism in any of its forms.
You'll never give in to terror? You already have, Mr. Cameron. The moment you decided to protect an ideology that calls for the annihilation of your civilization and the violent subjugation of your citizens, you gave in to terror. Now, if you want to protect Muslims who had nothing to do with the attack, that's one thing. That is part of your job description, and I'd be happy to help you protect individuals who don't support jihad, Muslim or non-Muslim. But you're protecting an ideology, one that commands its adherents, whether they know it or not, to brutally murder people like Lee Rigby. Instead of using your position to promote open discussion of this ideology, you use it to tell millions of people that anyone who obeys the Quran's clear commands to kill has somehow betrayed the religion that ordered him to kill.
This was not just an attack on Britain and on the British way of life. It was also a betrayal of Islam, a betrayal of Islam, a betrayal of Islam, a betrayal of Islam.
There's definitely a betrayal here, Prime Minister Cameron. But it's not a betrayal of Islam.